Three, two, one. Hey, everybody. I'm David Bloom with Next TMT Talks and the newsletter, Next TMT. We're here with my co-founder, Daniel Frankel, talking all things technology, media, and telecom, alongside our midweek partner, Media Play News. There is, of course, always lots to talk about. This week, the NFL is apparently reopened
With
as
what?
expected. They have reopened some of the conversations with all of their broadcast partners early. Instead of a 2029 look in provision, they are moving these things up because they saw how much money the NBA was making. And they thought, we're the biggest thing on TV. We need to be making more money too. And they already have $111 billion coming in over 11 years, plus some new little side deals they did with Netflix. But there are also some suggestions that how well you do the process of marketing and promoting and merchandising, to use the term in a recent series of studies of merchandising your stuff, really matters too. So, Dan, let's talk a little bit about that. It's like, yes, they're going to make a lot more money. Yes, all the broadcasters are going to have to pony up. And yes, they better figure out how to do it right across all their different outlets or they're wasting money. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, it's Looper Insights is based in London and run by a
Where they
fellow
play real football, right?
Lucas Bertrand, who's from Australia, who prefers Aussie rules football. You know the man as well. But they,
Yes, I
in
know him.
addition to doing a SaaS operation for major studio streaming companies, etc., to quote help them find their stuff globally across all these TVOS platforms, pay TV UXs, etc. They put out some research. They talked to a small group of around 60 high-level C-suite and exec VP level and above media technology executives about the broader sports business. Who will control sports streaming in 2026 is the report. And as the biggest kahuna of all sports leagues goes back into negotiations so soon after coming to this landmark deal in 2021. Smart to get that opt out, by the way. Some of these findings are pretty interesting. Now, reading, and it was John Oran at Puck who usually leads these things. He did it again. Not only are they ahead of 2029 when the league has its opt out with all these broadcast networks and streaming companies.
Technically, it's a look in, not an opt out, but they're looking in to see if they want to opt out.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
So the deal is, and they were smart because they said, stuff's changing. It's 2021. We're just coming out of the pandemic. Who knows what things will look like? We're making more than a decade-long bet with all these guys, and who knows whether anybody's watching broadcasts in 2033. So we need to have a mid-deal check-in. And it turns out it's going to be really lucrative for the league and its players, but minor quibble. But anyway, but that's what's going on. So they've moved it up because they saw what the NBA did with its $75 billion deal and the money it extracted and the value per hour of programming and rating point that they got was something like 3x what the NFL deal was generating, and can't be having that when 90 odd of the top 100 most watched shows of the year are going to be NFL games. It just doesn't make sense. I totally get why they're doing it, and they can because, as they like to say, leverage. But anyway, so let's go back into this study and how you tell your story or help people find it. I mean, people are annoyed. Another study recently by Hub suggests that people are annoyed by having the NFL sprinkled across everything. And it's only getting more sprinkly as we speak and more international as we speak. But the games can be found. You just got to do it right.
Yeah,
Right?
I mean, like, it's confusing for me, and we kind of, operate in this stew of, like, we know where the rights are, but, I find this for the NBA, I find this, especially for the NFL, it's really difficult to keep track of games. But, and in terms of Looper, they kind of go a level deeper. They're looking at, like, you know, on individual TVOS platforms, where are these things placed on the homepage? Are they on the homepage? Spending this much for sports rights almost is imperative to go out there and on every homepage of every TVOS platform, scream it every Sunday. But Looper went a little broader than that. They talked about sort of like the acquisition of rights and the broader picture. And what I thought was really interesting, the first graphic they get into, they asked, by 2026, who do you believe will be the greatest structural power in sports media. And what I thought was interesting is it's equal split between the leagues, 39.4%, and global entertainment streamers, Netflix, Prime Video, etc.
Not ESPN.
Ecosystems controlling discovery and tools, YouTube, that's another large slice of the pie. I would think what we're hearing about the NFL, that the leagues would have a much bigger portion of that pie. I would think it'd be like 60 or 70%. It seems like they have all the leverage here.
I would think they do, but you know, sometimes, and this is an interesting thing to ponder in this era as we're about to dive into full AI generation of all kinds of content, both sloppy and less sloppy, in a set of available content that often is hard to discover. You know, sometimes more doesn't necessarily lead to more. And I think that's going to be interesting to see how they deal with that. You know, it's really fascinating to me because I'll be writing some today for our midweek stuff about the mess over in college sports, and it's so desperate they've asked Donald Trump to step in and and write another not probably very useful executive order because the last one did so much to fix the thing because they can't get this legislation through in the middle of a Congress that's in the middle of midterms and partial government shutdown and other little odds. And oh, a war, forgot that, the war,
I know
not
it's
war,
absurd.
the
I
not war.
mean,
Yeah.
we're turning to this guy at this time. I mean, no matter how you feel about him, he's got to get this fixed. I don't want him
But
focused on.
it should not be his first priority. Let me just be clear. You've got people dying in multiple countries over this little not war, and so maybe that should be a little higher priority.
Yeah,
Also,
it's not
you know,
just the gas pump; it has profound impact for the global economy.
yeah, yeah. There's lots of conversations about urea, which is made out of natural gas, and a quarter of it comes out of Qatar and all that, and it's shipped to places like India and is really important in terms of fertilizer. Very important in terms of fertilizer to be able to feed the world. So
So
also
I'm
important.
interested in your perspective on. We've talked about it a long time. College sports is in a profound state of flux. It could use some refinement and change. This NIL thing is a little bit out of control, but getting back to the insights of this report and the rubber meets the road factors that affect negotiation. This is another interesting tidbit, which I like. It's the second chart in the report. When major sports rights are negotiated in the next cycle, which factor do you think will matter most? Number one, at nearly 39%, is global reach and scale. And I thought that was interesting. You were trying to impress upon me earlier the emergence of the importance of international rights. And it's something that when we talk about the NFL, we don't fixate enough, probably.
Well, it's been tough with the NFL because they're really trying to get into Europe. They're really trying to get into South America and Mexico, and having games in Mexico City, having games in Brazil, having games in London and Germany over and over again. They've been in London, I think, for a decade now, and they've got a little bit of a dent there. They are just not as international a sport as basketball. And an example, speaking of international, in Media Play News today, there's a little story about Disney Plus is going to be carrying March Madness college basketball in Europe and South Africa. The NBA has a whole separate unit of basketball in Africa, a giant opportunity, as well as trying to launch a European league. Already has a big presence in China, and their last 7 MVPs were all born somewhere other than the United States. So they're already there. And the NFL is trying to get more international, but part of the challenge, I mean, is the game doesn't travel quite as well. It is magical here in terms of its reach, but it doesn't travel as well. But international is where the growth will be for these big streamers. It's the US market is largely built out. If you want streaming, you've got it. And most people who want it have it. And maybe they're now just tweaking at the edges. So it becomes a fight over shifting slices of the same size ish pie over time. You know, these guys get a little bit more because it's Super Bowl. Peacock all of a sudden got a big bump because they had Super Bowl, NBA All-Star Game, and those little Winter Olympic things. It was their legendary February. And they did great. It did great. But we'll see how many people stick around afterward. And it's how you get in these other markets. So one of the things that was interesting about the merger between Warner and Paramount is that They're already, HBO Max is already, I think, 125 countries. CBS and Paramount Plus has been steadily expanding. Is like in 90 plus, maybe getting close to 100. Netflix is in 192. YouTube is in over 200, et cetera, et cetera. So who are you competing? YouTube, kind of everywhere, right? And that's now we have found bigger than Disney. If you broke, I think Laura Martin had projected over at Needham, the analyst over at Needham, who likes to throw a bomb every once in a while. She's pretty fun, delightful person. Love Laura. If you broke YouTube out of Alphabet, it would be on its own a $200 billion company, which is basically Disney. And now they're saying it's bigger than that. So something has more reach than Disney. And Mickey's everywhere. So, and we
Let
say
me
that as Bob Iger's about to retire. So
back up
there
a
you go.
little bit and ask you this. I mean, the part of the NFL, the drama surrounding these negotiations is it wants to sort of further proliferate its rights into streaming. And it's not talking about big new full season partners, it's talking about one offs. It sounds like kind of what it's doing with Netflix, where it's
It
doing
sounds like it's Netflix Plus, and probably that's because the streamers like YouTube already has a YouTube TV deal with a Sunday Ticket. It's a big deal, right?
right.
That's for your hardcore fans. But
A better thing
it's
to mention would be the Sao Paulo Brazil game they do every year.
yeah, it's Sao Paulo. Yeah, sure, sure.
So it seems like they're kind of I guess it started in London a decade ago, and they're doing these regular games overseas. They do in the case of that Brazil game, it does quite well. They great on YouTube, produced I guess at the
Yeah,
time the biggest
yeah.
live sports numbers ever. So are these global audiences? What do we know? Is it serving the purpose? It's certainly generating big audience here at home, but is it achieving the goals of the league? Are they getting big international audiences out of this? Do we know that at this point?
I think this is a long game for Roger Goodell. To be frank, you pick up at the margin some fans that you wouldn't absolutely would not get otherwise. I mean, you're going to one of the temples of like they play in Azteca Stadium in Mexico City. That is 100,000 seat stadium, bigger than anything in the NFL, which typically is around 75,000. Partly to make sure they don't ever get blacked out on under those blackout rules and stuff like that. 100,000 people, and is the home of their soccer, the core of the MX soccer league, Liga MX, I think is what it's called. Same thing in Sao Paulo. The stadium they use there is gigantic. So they get a set of folks who wouldn't care otherwise, who go to see the spectacle, or oh, let's check this out, and then maybe you get some folks and it builds. But it's not like they're starting football teams or even flag football teams in the high schools of Rio de Janeiro or the beaches of Bahia. They
Yeah,
got
it's
drum
not.
lines they need to be doing. So I would really love to see the drum corps at the halftime of a Bahia football game. That's going to be awesome.
Dave, you like to, it's true, you're well traveled. You've been to many ports of call in Europe and beyond. In Europe, have you witnessed any kind of curiosity about American football?
I think there's an awareness that wasn't there 10 years ago. I think they can credit themselves for that. There is definitely a set of folks who are, this is improbable, fans of the Jacksonville Jaguars who have largely been the ones consigned to go to London every year. Um, as a home game, quote unquote. They're
If you're
home
not
away
going to,
from home.
if you're not going to win a Super Bowl, you might as well.
You might as
Yeah,
well get a fine trip to the high road in Chelsea
right.
while you're there and maybe stop at the V&A Museum, or I would always recommend going to the Tate Modern myself, or just checking out the JMW work at the Tate Britain. But I'm a museum guy myself. Piccadilly Circus beckons for some. But there are charms and opportunities there. And London, there's like half a dozen English Premier League teams in London, though Tottenham, the arch rival of my team, the Arsenal Gooners, is facing possible relegation, which is unimaginable. But they're 4 miles apart, and there's not a lot of rivalries like that. I mean, we've got the the NFL's Chargers and Rams in the same stadium, okay, fine. And same thing, I think, with the Jets and the Giants, but they rarely play each other, whereas these guys play each other multiple times a year, and they're 4 miles apart and have been fighting each other for most of the century. So they feel it. They feel it. And yet they're going to somehow, some of those folks are going to look up and go, oh, this American football is interesting. The other thing that's problematic for American football is the pace of the game is different. It is custom built for American ad supported broadcast television. In Europe, most of the big broadcasters are publicly owned. There are no ads. Soccer's great. You hit go and you watch. And then you stop, and maybe you have something, and you have ads wrapped around the stadium and things you might put on the screen and all that, but you don't really have breaks. So it's different. And American football is really customized to generate billions of dollars in revenue from brands advertising and all those breaks between plays, changes of control of the ball, et cetera, timeouts, so on and so forth. It's just a different game and a different ecosystem. I've been reading a book by David Byrne called How Music Works. And one of the points he makes early in the book is that creativity is not just this thing that wells out of you that you have to do. Creativity is shaped by its context. Well, so are sports ecosystems. They're shaped by their context. So American football was primed to be hugely successful in the 60s and on because it was built for what TV under Pete Rozelle, the NFL was set to do really well with what TV was becoming in that era. And it's continued to just get bigger and bigger and more important. It's not the same in Europe. And so it'll be really interesting to see how it gets, whether it ever gets substantial followings or it becomes just sort of remains a novelty and something kind of fun and different. Again, a spectacle that you watch when the circus comes to town.
I forgot it was reviewed in the New York Times recently. There's a book about as popular as football is right now, that in 30 years it might just fade to the margins.
Yeah. And that was a notable author. I'm trying to remember who it was. Chuck, I think it was the Fight Club guy, wasn't it?
I don't remember, but it
I'll
does
have
make
to
sense.
look it up.
I mean, it's such a specialized, I mean, I grew up with it and I can't imagine not having it in my life, but it took years. It's like, certainly when I was a kid, it was like drinking beer. You didn't like it at first. It was too complicated and to really know what's going on. It's something you have to really invest in. I talked to one of my father-in-law's friends who's from Philadelphia. He's a symphony guy. He talked about how long it took him to really appreciate all the acoustical minutia that goes into good symphony. And I think it's an
Yeah.
investment. It's trying to make it sound like fine wine. I remember going to a different South America. I was in Medellin, Colombia, about 10 years ago, and
Well,
take
you got
tram.
to get your cocaine from somewhere, Dan. I understand that.
I
You go to
didn't.
the
I,
motherlode.
I didn't store one line when I was there. I was a little disappointed, but
Yeah.
I was
That seems
taking
like
pictures
a
of tram,
tourist oversight, but
and you go. It's the most interesting tram ride you'll ever have. You go over most impossibly poor neighborhoods you've ever seen, going up the steep mountain. In addition to all these like places that you can't really understand how people sort of like conduct daily lives, there's soccer fields everywhere. And you realize the part of that game, all you need is a ball
ball.
and a makeshift.
And not necessarily a ball. It could be clothes balled up and taped together and a couple of other pieces of clothing as goals. That's literally all you need and a flattish place. The book we're talking about, by the way, is called, and this was a stretch for him when he came up with the name. It's called Football by Chuck Klosterman, who's written a lot of stuff.
Right.
And Klosterman is an interesting writer. But you're right. He's saying that long term, it's vulnerable because some of his structural things, he's more of a cultural critic. He wrote about the 90s. He wrote about sex, drugs, and Cocoa Puffs was one of his books, which I rather like. But he's from North Dakota, and he's been an interesting cultural writer for a long time. But his point is that the game, and they know football in North Dakota because North Dakota and North Dakota State are long time second tier college powerhouses in football. He's
I
right. It's
think
got some vulnerabilities.
one of them had to go FBS recently. They'd conquered all their
Yes.
world.
Yeah. I think North Dakota State went up. The Antelopes or something, I think they're called. But yeah, they went up, which is kind of hard to justify on a financial basis. But again, part of the problem that's facing college football is that it's hard with all the money that's coming in from TV. It's still hard to make it all pencil out. Many schools can't afford the new spending requirements of sharing $20 million a year with their athletes, and how they divvy that up to football, basketball, non-revenue sports such as gymnastics and softball and volleyball, track, et cetera, is up to them. But a lot of schools are kind of over a barrel. They're having to get subsidized by other parts of universities, which is not the idea and not sustainable. And if college football, the free development league for the NFL, is less than it was, that will start to impair what the NFL is. And I think long term, that's certainly something to watch as they try to figure out things at the college level. The NFL tries to get more money now, and it'll figure out the next thing. It'll figure out 2033 and 2029, basically. So
So I can go
going to be very
deeper.
interesting.
I'm looking at this Looper report, and they ask questions about, what is the lasting impact of marquee sports events to a streaming service. 20% or just under say they create long-term subscriber loyalty. 39% say they create short-term spikes with limited lasting impact, and another 37% say they mainly reinforce streaming services people already use. It's hard to say that it's necessarily existential, but then you move down to this, they drill even further. How powerful do you think bundling sports into broader media ecosystems will be by 2026? Pretty powerful. 39% say useful in the retention and acquisition of
Yeah.
subscribers, the biggest
Yeah.
share. So it's
It's
assumed that.
interesting. I wanted to just throw in one more thing. Klosterman, I forgot about this. Klosterman was a co-founder of Grantland with Bill Simmons, which
They
was
were.
a great effort to write about sports in a much more literary and thoughtful and intellectually rigorous way, I think is fair to say. Whatever limitations Simmons has from time to time, he's an unabashed fan, but Klosterman was a co-founder with him of that effort, and God bless him for that, 'cause that was
No,
great.
as much as mainly because he's a Celtics fan and I'm a Lakers fan, and he's a little obnoxious. Simmons is a media genius.
I have heard that there are occasionally a few, not many, but a few Lakers fans who are obnoxious. For instance, one Laker fan you have despised in the past is Bill Maher, who I noted had a NBA Laker in his lap when he was sitting next to the scorer's table at the courtside seat with a very attractive, far younger woman the week he celebrated his 70th birthday
Yeah.
on Sunday.
Who was that like?
Want to say it was somebody like Jeremy Vanderbilt, but I can't remember off the top of my head. It was a very large human moving at a fairly high rate of speed, trying to save a ball going out of bounds, and he ended up in Bill Maher's lap. Bill Maher is not 6'8",
I
or
know.
anything close to it.
I ran into him at a DGA in the bathroom line like 20 years ago at the DGA Awards, and I couldn't believe it. He makes Dustin Hoffman look tall. I mean, he's not tall.
Well, I've interviewed Dustin. I've talked with Bill. Neither of them are large men, and we're both over 6 feet, so maybe we shouldn't be heightist in our regard. But it
But
is
our
interesting to
focus,
see him. Yeah,
our
but we're
focus
focused.
is well statured.
Yes,
So
yes.
we should probably wrap this, given the fact that we're.
Yeah, we probably should, but I had only occasion to mention that because we're in the merger that's coming. Bill missed the week of the deal going through with Warner Brothers and Paramount because he was celebrating his 70th birthday, and he looks good for 70. I'll totally give him that. He came back and said, welcome aboard, Paramount. Hope you like what I do. If you don't, I ain't going to change. So one of the concerns is obviously he and John Oliver, two very tart critics from time to time of the president, may be vulnerable, particularly because the president launched on a long list of
See, this is where
grievances against Mayor, and he was like,
not
"You
that
got a
we
war to fight, and you're going to post about all this stuff." And he had like 20 posts about Mayor, so
I
Mayor's going
do.
to be fine.
I think this idea that Bill Maher never changes is not correct. I think he's pivoted right of center now. He was super lefty guy during Trump one. He was another guy back on ABC. Not that he's not entertaining, not that he's not smart, not that he kind of got jacked over during that whole 9/11 ABC thing. But I do think he's kind of a chameleon, and this chumming up to Trump, or we need to go along with it because this is what's here. This is the power structure that's here. I haven't agreed
Well,
with it.
I don't think he was just going along. I think he said, "Look, his whole point is we got to reach out to the other side." He has Republicans and Democrats on his show all the time
Yeah.
from many stripes. And his point, and I think it's a valid point, is somebody who covered politics and policy for 15 years, including politics in Texas. as it was transforming from yellow dog Democrats to dyed in wool conservative opportunity society Republicans. You got to talk to everybody. And Maher, to his credit, does. And there aren't many places that do that. And that was part of a reason why he went to go talk to Trump. And Trump was fine. Trump was nice. And then he has a hissy fit 'cause something got in his underwear, I guess, or maybe he had another rash on his neck or something. And he just fires off just a
Yeah,
fusillade
I saw that.
of posts about Trump. And Maher's like, what did I do? Like, you got a war and you're or a not war, and you did this. Anyway, so I don't know if he's in trouble or not, but he's like, he's fine because he can afford courtside seats next to the scorers table at the Lakers, which is probably a $5,000 per ticket seat. So, and he got two.
I think it's 70. He could like if this doesn't go his way, he can.
And he'll just do some more, like go on the road and stuff and do one offs and things, but he'll be fine. Anyway, with that, we're going to wrap this up. This is David Bloom with Next TMT Talks with my co founder, Daniel Frankel. You can follow us on YouTube. We are now live streaming. I hope you all who are out there, our vast live streaming audience, all of you, all, I see you, Jimmy. I see you, Billy. I'm feeling like romper room now. Uh, you can follow us on live streaming on multiple platforms, including LinkedIn. But we would really love for you to follow our page on LinkedIn so we can live stream this on our LinkedIn page for Next TMT. So go to Next TMT's page on LinkedIn and say, yes, I want to follow. We appreciate that. You can get our weekly newsletter, which is now going twice a week. That makes us semi-weekly, not bi-weekly, but semi-weekly, with lots of tasty stuff, more video, links to video at Next TMT as in technology, media, and telecom, .com, nextTMT.com. And with all that, and thanks again to our media partner, Media Play News. And this is David Bloom and Daniel Frankel, over and out.